What is up, everyone? It's Dante back at it with the Utah Utes Football Digest. Today, we'll be breaking down the Utah versus UCLA game that's happening this Saturday. Going over best bets as well. So far this season, 2-0 on best bets. I gave out the first half under in the Florida game. I gave out Baylor's team total under in the Baylor game. Didn't do one last week because the line didn't come out until the day of the game. It was a little bit of a weird week. I also didn't really particularly like anything on the slate. Whereas this week, I do have a play for this game. We'll get to that in a little bit. But as for right now, let's just dive right into it with Utah's offense versus UCLA's defense. So for Utah quarterback, there's a little bit of uncertainty still. It looks like Cameron Rising is going to give it a go, but I can't be 100% sure. We've said that in the past, and that hasn't been the case. And Utah tends to not share too much when it comes to their injury situation. Kyle Whittingham has still said this has been the worst injury situation he's seen as a head coach. So the Utes are far from healthy. But regardless, whoever's playing quarterback, the offensive line is going to have to play really well in this game, both passing the ball or both as pass blocking and in the run blocking department. In the run blocking department, Utah's run blocking has been pretty average thus far. They've played good competition, so you can't really expect a whole lot out of a group this early in the season, but they have left some to be desired. You'd expect a Utah offensive line to be a little bit better, though this is still a proven group. Keaton Bills and Satawa Lomea are two solid returning starters, and Spencer Fano, the true freshman, hasn't looked bad either. It's going to be a tough test for him this week, though, as well as Lomea, who didn't fare very well against UCLA last year. UCLA returns all their great defensive ends from last season, that being Latu, possibly the first overall pick in next year's NFL draft, and Grayson and Gabriel Murphy, the North Texas transfers, who were just absolute menaces last season. To be honest, all these guys were just menaces in terms of getting to the quarterback. They all were just extremely good rushing the passer. I think they all boasted a pass rushing win rate above 18%, and they've all started this year off exceptionally well. They're all pretty physical pass rushers who also have some speed to them, just all-around guys who you'll be seeing in the NFL pretty soon. So Utah's going to come prepared in terms of both run blocking and pass blocking. As for the weapons, Brant Keithy's questionable. Devon Vele is also questionable. But regardless, I think Utah's going to be able to throw the ball against this UCLA secondary. They returned 3 of 4 starters from last season, from the back end of their defense last season. But none of them were particularly good last season. They all allowed a passer rating above 100 when targeted. And just overall, they left some to be desired. They were a group that kind of tailed off as the season progressed, had some pretty poor performances down the stretch of the season. And they're not a group that really jumps out at you to the point where you think Utah won't be able to have a successful day against them. I think regardless of who's throwing the football, whether that be Nate Johnson or Cam Rising, I think Utah's passing attack will be able to generate some rhythm, just as long as the offensive line is able to block and keep the likes of Latu, and the Murphy brothers out of the backfield on a consistent basis. So I think there's a path to points for Utah, both on the ground and through the air. This UCLA defense is by no means a pushover, though. Their defensive line is very physical. They have some experience as well. So, I don't think Utah is going to come in and just exploit them instantly. I think it's going to take a little bit of time. I don't think Utah is going to be scoring touchdowns on every single drive in the first half, for instance. But I do think they'll be able to reach the end zone probably 3 or 4 times, and this will end up being a game that ends up being kind of a grinder. But I don't think there's ever going to be a point in the game where UCLA has a multiple possession lead over Utah, or the game just seems like it's out of reach for Utah. I think Utah will keep it within a comfortable margin the entire time, and by the end, kind of just grind UCLA down, score a couple of touchdowns late, and get out of this one with a win. But as for the UCLA offense versus the Utah defense, UCLA's offensive line has a couple of liabilities, not necessarily in a liable way, but more so they're going to be liable for this matchup against Utah, primarily because Jonah Ellis has been on an absolute tear to start off the season. He had 2 sacks against Florida. He's got a 21% pass rushing win rate. And then also you got to take into account Logan Fano, the BYU transfer, has looked exceptional as well. Has 6 pressures, and Utah gets so much pass rushing production from their other positions as well. Cole Bishop has 5 pressures, 2 sacks. Leonard Barton also has 5 pressures. So, they're getting a lot of pressure from a lot of different position groups. And this is a UCLA tackle group that has looked vulnerable. You look at their left tackle last season, gave up 37 pressures. And then their right tackle, it's his first year starting this year. He has not gone off to the season very well at all. He's been their worst offensive lineman, and that's against pretty poor competition. Now he's going to see a significant step up in competition against these Utah defensive ends. I don't think it's going to be a very good day for them. And then that goes hand in hand with Dante Moore's performance. I think as much as I think he's a good quarterback, and I'm a fan of UCLA's weapons as well. Their pass catching corps. They got Kyle Ford, a USC transfer, who's long and athletic. Like him a lot. They also got Logan Loya, who scored a long touchdown against Utah still, and they also added J. Michael Sturdivant from Cal. He's got a very DeAndre Hopkins-esque feel to his game. Long arms, but is still a very physical player at the top of his route. Has some speed to him too that makes defensive backs have to respect him, respect all the types of routes that he can run. That just makes him a very tough cover, a very pesky cover, especially at the college level. So, I mean, they do have some good pass catchers. They do have some good players, but I do think that this Utah defensive end group is going to really have its way in this game and kind of exploit UCLA's disadvantages there and the inexperience that Dante Moore boasts at quarterback, because he just simply hasn't played a road game or a conference road game yet. He hasn't played a conference game yet. I think this is a significant step up in terms of competition, in terms of athleticism, in terms of physicality that he just hasn't seen at the college level yet. I don't think Salt Lake City is a very good place for a young quarterback to be starting their conference career, but here we are, and Dante Moore could more than definitely prove me wrong. He's capable, made some really impressive throws. He's averaging over 10 yards per attempt. However, I just think that this Utah defensive end group is really going to have their way, and that's going to keep UCLA behind the sticks, kind of prevent them from playing their game, which is very, very matchups oriented, very numbers oriented. They try to motion a lot pre-snap and create advantages on the field and create short yardage situations for their players to end up breaking out a long one and short, quick passes that they get their playmakers into the open field. But if you're behind the sticks, that doesn't really work out as well, and it just makes navigating the game a little bit tougher. I think Utah's defensive end corps is really going to be able to cause havoc in this game and prevent UCLA from generating any consistent rhythm. And then in terms of explaining the line, this line has moved around quite a bit. It opened at 4.5 on Sunday, and now it's moved to 6, as Cam Rising is likely going to play from what it sounds like, which is very encouraging. I think this is a very fair line. If anything, I think it's pointing towards a UCLA cover, honestly, but probably a Utah win, just because I would have imagined Utah to be a little bit of a bigger of a favorite at home, especially against a freshman quarterback. And UCLA hasn't really earned a lot of respect from Vegas, I don't think. They weren't as big of favorites as I would have imagined them to be in their first few games. So now that they've kind of earned that respect after only just covering a spread against like San Diego State, which in my opinion wasn't a very hard spread to cover, 13 points. Like I would imagine UCLA is winning that game by at least 4 possessions. So they've clearly earned a little bit more respect from Vegas with this line being as close as it is. I think it kind of points towards a UCLA cover. I wouldn't be shocked if UCLA covered, but I also wouldn't be shocked if Utah were to win. But as for the total, that's really what we're going to get into. I like the under 52.5 in this game. I think Utah wins by a final score of about 27-17, something along those lines. A couple of possession win for Utah, but I don't see UCLA getting over anything more than like 24 points. I don't see Utah really turning the ball over much in this game. Utah's got their punting situation figured out now. There's not going to be a lot of liabilities with this Utah team. They're not going to be beating themselves. They're not going to be giving UCLA easy field position, especially at home. And this is a Utah team that's certainly gotten up for Pac-12 play over the past few years. This is a group that really emphasizes doing well in Pac-12 play. They're going to want to start the Pac-12 season off right. I don't think they're going to make many mistakes on offense. I don't think there's going to be any turnovers from them. And then I think offensively for UCLA, I don't think there's going to be many turnovers either. But like I said, I think they're going to be behind the sticks pretty consistently, which is going to limit their offensive firepower. And then in general, just kind of stall the game. Like I said, a little bit of a low scoring, a little bit of a grindy game that remains pretty close, but towards the end, Utah kind of just pulls away, ends up winning by a couple of possessions. Like I said, my score prediction is 27-17. However, the under 52.5 is my play. We're 2-0 on this season. Let's hope we can get it to 3-0. If you guys want other plays, go to my Twitter. I tweet them out every week. A little bit of a slow start to the season, but I promise we'll get back on track. And I love some of the games that are on the card this week. So other than that, have a good weekend. Thanks for tailing, and thanks for listening.